So you're talking about narrative, and can you talk a little bit about the power of storytelling and leading? I mean, we hear there's books written about it now, and I've read some, and they don't seem to really get it. And you've taught me how to do that. I'm learning every day, and I've got a long ways to go. But talk about the power of storytelling and influencing and owning the narrative to be a great leader.
If I asked you to write on a piece of paper the words, "Who am I?" How many people think that's a bit of a tough question? Takes some insight to do that work. But if I told you you can't use your age, your hobbies, your relationships, your job, your salary, is that a trick question? No. All those things can and will change without your permission. And you're still here. Who's here? The question just got harder, and you've been around yourself roughly since birth. You see? So a narrative is a story. We're all the stories we tell ourselves we are. That's who we are. And like I say, some of them are true, some of them are old, haven't been true for 30 years. I've got the Smith luck. We're somewhere in there. And when we can find ourselves today, because we enter each day of life as a novice, never been here before. Cool, I'm smarter than I was yesterday. Cool. Never had this opportunity before. What do I do with it? And I think about that. I don't phone in things by rote, as Mark knows. What do I have that I've not seen before that I can work with that might be different? So we're the stories we tell ourselves we are, because every word we have in our mind as a definition, dear, is about us. I explained that one earlier, right? Every notion or idea, which is a string of a glossary of terms together, makes up a story. The mind will defend that story to the death, rather than accept a new notion. So you're a leader. You're supposed to influence somebody else to let go of their notion and grab onto yours, and they've never done it before. How do you get them to do that? Through authority? Through salary or pay or docking their pay? How do you get a mind to let go of what it knows to be true, to accept a possible other notion that might disregard this, and all of a sudden you've pivoted a business and you're creating more money than you had in your other business with very similar people, if not some the same?
Joe, I've always believed that perspective is everything. And whether you come into this room and see that wall, or you come into this room and see that wall, perspective is totally different. Is that an oversimplification of what you're saying, or is that a part of what you're saying?
That's a very much part of what I'm saying. You can only see it from your perspective. To get someone to understand or see it from their perspective, they have to deny what they're seeing for a minute. They have to absolutely deny it, or hold it in suspension. There's a guy named William Taylor Coleridge. He died in 1834. Lived about 60 years. Did a lot of absinthe. And absinthe had woodworm in it, so he saw a lot of things that didn't really exist. But he was a poet. But he was also a surrealist writer. And he was trying to analyze, how can you write a story about a pig talking to a flying cow and have the reader not go, that's ridiculous. How does that happen? How do you go to a James Bond movie and walk out and going, he's still cool? Like, you don't walk out and go, no one could do that. And he coined this term that you've probably heard called the willing suspension of disbelief. You willingly suspend your disbelief when you open the book or you walk into the movie theater. Would you agree? And you let the director tell you a story, and as long as there's a human enough connection in there for you to relate to, you're fine. Your mind can consider the story as metaphor or allegory, and it'll make sense to you. So in thinking about getting a mind to suspend what it knows, what it perceives, its perception. And thinking about that, I coined the term for my new book, the willful suspension of the known. If our greatest desire is to be right, how do you get someone to willfully suspend that which they know to be true, so that you have a chance to get them to at least listen to your idea? And I'll go to Shakespeare. There was a... has anybody studied history or Roman history or Caesar? John. Okay, so John knows. And there are Roman historians that actually recorded what happened to Caesar in the Forum. Shakespeare was a historian. He researched that. If you line up word for word the historian's account and Caesar's version of the more romantic version of the Julius Caesar assassination, it's right in line. We know he was stabbed 23 times. We're pretty sure Brutus was last. Brutus didn't want to stab his friend. But the senator stood there and looked at him. And he had two choices. Die, stab Caesar. We're all in this together. Et tu, Brute. Mark Antony wasn't there. Mark Antony was one of Caesar's generals, Caius and Mark Antony. Mark Antony comes into the Forum. Mark Antony loved Caesar. He looks at his army has to stay outside the walls, a Roman rule. He looks at Caesar's bloody body. He looks at the senators holding their knives, and they pretty much give him the same deal that they gave Brutus. He says, I understand. I understand you did what you have to do. I'll only ask for one thing. Let me address the Romans. Let me present Caesar's body to the Romans. He loved these people. And they all agreed, okay, it sounds risky, but he's just a general. We got Brutus here. Brutus is an orator. More of a legal orator. He'll state his case. He doesn't really appeal to the allegorical mind. But they didn't know that at the time. They hadn't studied Aristotle. So they present the body, and I almost got arrested in the Roman Forum last year because I was showing my best friend where they presented the body, and I happen to know a lot about Roman history. And the police were, what do they call it, the trade police? You know, they thought I was poaching, right? Because I'm pointing to everything, and they come over and they want my papers, and they separate us, and I'm like, but that's what they thought I was doing because I knew where things were. So that made my buddy feel happy. So they want Brutus to go first because they want him to win the day. And once the audience, the Romans, know why we killed Caesar, it's going to be harder for him to convince them they're wrong. They were smart enough to know that. Mark Antony just sits back. Brutus said, he made his case. Would you rather make him your emperor and all die slaves? Or would you rather be freedmen of Rome? We did this for Rome. I'm paraphrasing. He wins the day. Everyone's going, well, seems to make sense. Shakespeare gave Mark Antony 7 words that allowed him to have the audience willfully suspend the known that they just heard from Brutus. 7 words. He says, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ear. That's all he said. Now let's analyze that. If you're a boss, you're the lead person in your organization, that audience identifies itself a little bit differently than we segment them out. There are directors and executives and employees and hourly and salary. And he basically said, hey, friends. No, he didn't say friends. He said friends, if we are. Romans, if you prefer. And countrymen, if you prefer. But we're all countrymen. And they're in. And their amygdala stands down. They're okay so far. He didn't say, shut up and listen. He said, he's lying to you. That would have been an immediate attack. Defense would have kicked in on their minds. He didn't say, you got to hear this. He didn't say, give me your mind. Lend. Lend? Amygdala's okay. I can lend. Lend me your what? Just your ear. Just your ear. He's got them willfully suspending what they know now to consider what he says. And he says, these are all honorable men. And they did what they thought they had to do for Rome. What you don't know is I have Caesar's will. I have what Caesar was going to give you when he died. And he goes on, and these are honorable men. By the time he's done, they're rioting. They want the senators killed. Caius goes, gets his army. Mark Antony goes, gets his army. They fight for a while, and in the end, Caius falls on his sword. That's where that saying comes from. So as a leader, if we want to get an idea that isn't probably, it could be new in some way, we have to get them to willfully suspend the known idea that is their idea, which they will defend, because that's how the mind works. Does it make sense?